Usually when we think about what happens when someone breaks a promise, we tend to think about, like, the emotional fallout.
Right, the personal side of it.
Exactly. Like, you promise to help a friend move their couch, you don't show up, and maybe that friendship is just, well, maybe it's lost, or at least severely damaged.
Yeah, there's definitely an emotional cost there. It feels incredibly personal.
It does. But when you step into the world of contract law, a broken promise triggers this entirely different reality.
Oh, completely different. It's not about feelings at all.
Right. It activates this, incredibly intricate, almost like a clockwork machine. And it's designed to, well, essentially make things right.
Yeah, to restore a very specific kind of economic balance. Because in the legal sphere, a broken promise, it's not a moral failing.
Right, really? It's not?
No, not at all. It's simply a breach. That's all it is. And, that breach just requires a remedy. Yeah, so what we're looking at is this highly mechanized system. It attempts to take the messy, unpredictable nature of human interaction and quantify the exact value of that broken promise.
And deliver a concrete solution.
Exactly.
And today, we are going to look at the exact choreography of that machine. We're unpacking Chapter 8 on remedies.
The ultimate survival guide, basically.
Right. A survival guide for understanding what happens after a contract just goes completely south. And if you're taking the multi-state bar examination, the MBE...
Oh, yeah. Listen up. This is absolutely critical high-yield territory. You will see this on the exam.
Everywhere. Right. But even if you aren't a law student, if you're just someone navigating the business world or signing everyday agreements, you really need to understand this machinery.
You definitely do.
So our mission for this deep dive is to strip away all the confusing jargon. We're going to use simple English and really look at how the law actually attempts to fix a breach.
And it's a fascinating architecture, honestly. To understand it, you have to realize that when a court looks at a breach, it basically has two main buckets of tools to fix it.
Okay, 2 buckets. What are we looking at?
First, you have non-monetary remedies.
So not money.
Right. This is the court wielding its power to essentially force someone to do something or, force them to return specific property.
Okay, that makes sense. And the second bucket?
The second bucket is monetary remedies, which is the court stepping back and saying, look, we can't fix the action, so someone just has to pay for the damage.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with that first bucket, right? When money just won't cut it.
The non-monetary side.
Yeah, because before a court ever looks at, calculating a financial payout, it has to ask a much more fundamental question, doesn't it?
It does. It asks, why can't the court just force you to actually keep your promise?
Right. Like, if you break a promise to me, if you agree to sell me something, why can't a judge just bang a gavel and be like, hand it over?
Well, that concept is known as specific performance.
Specific performance.
Yeah, it's an equitable remedy, which means it originated in the old courts of equity rather than the courts of law.
Gotcha.
It's a direct court order. It literally commands the breaching party to perform the exact specific terms of the contract.
Sounds powerful.
It is. But here is the absolute cornerstone rule, and you really need to know this for the MBE.
Okay, hit me.
Specific performance is only available when the legal remedy, meaning money damages, is completely inadequate.
Wow. Okay, that is a massive distinction. So the legal system's default setting is really just to throw money at a problem.
Pretty much, yeah. You have to actively prove to a judge that a check just isn't enough to make you whole.
Man, that's wild. Now, based on the established rules, this really only works in a few distinct categories, right?
Right. There are 3 main categories. Let's look at the first one. Land contracts.
Okay, land.
The rule says specific performance is almost always available for land because every single piece of land is considered utterly unique.
Utterly unique.
Yes. To the eyes of the law, there is absolutely no such thing as interchangeable real estate.
Okay, but I want to push back on that a little bit because practically speaking, is that really true anymore?
What do you mean?
I understand if we're talking about like a historic farm with a waterfall, right? Or a penthouse overlooking Central Park.
Sure. Obviously unique.
But what if you're buying a house in a massive, modern suburban development in Nevada?
The subdivision example.
Exactly. You know the kind, like 1,000 houses built by the exact same developer.
Right.
The floor plans are identical. The gray paint is identical. Even the little bushes in the front yard, they're exactly identical.
I don't know exactly what you're talking about.
So from a practical human perspective, those houses are basically interchangeable. How does the law justify calling that unique?
It's a great question, and it really highlights the tension between modern reality and sort of historical legal fiction.
Legal fiction.
Yeah. You have to remember that contract law regarding land evolved centuries ago in English common law.
Okay.
And back then, land was the ultimate irreplaceable source of wealth and status.
So they just locked in that rule forever?
Pretty much. The law developed this rigid philosophy. So even in your massive Nevada subdivision, those two seemingly identical houses sit on entirely different physical plots of Earth.
Right, the dirt is different.
Exactly. They possess uniquely different GPS coordinates. One house is situated, 30 feet closer to a fire hydrant.
Or one gets a slightly different angle of afternoon sunlight.
Precisely. Because they occupy a different physical space on the planet, the law declares them fundamentally unique.
That's so literal.
It is. So if a seller promises to sell you Lot 82 and then breaches, offering you Lot 83 or handing you a check, simply doesn't give you what you bargained for.
Because I contracted for that exact piece of the earth.
Exactly. Therefore, a court will almost always force the actual sale of the land.
Okay, that is fascinating. The law is essentially saying that geography itself is irreplaceable.
That's a great way to put it.
So that covers land. The second category where specific performance is an option is the sale of goods.
Right. Now, unlike land, most goods are completely interchangeable.
Yeah, a toaster is a toaster. A smartphone is a smartphone.
Exactly. But the law allows specific performance for goods that are rare or unique.
Okay, give me an example.
So if you contract to buy a famous, one-of-a-kind Picasso painting, and the gallery owner decides at the last minute they don't want to sell it to you.
I can't just go buy another one.
Right. A check for the value of the painting doesn't truly remedy the breach. You didn't want the financial equivalent of a Picasso. You wanted that exact Picasso. There's literally no other one in the world.
But it's not just priceless art, right? The legal test here is deeply tied to the concept of cover.
Yes, cover is crucial here.
So if a buyer cannot cover, meaning they cannot go out into the open market and buy a reasonable substitute,
Right.
then specific performance becomes a real possibility.
Exactly. The concept of cover is the heartbeat of the Uniform Commercial Code, the UCC.
Which governs the sale of goods.
Right. Let's say you own a specialized manufacturing plant.
Yeah.
Okay. And you contract to buy a highly customized, intricate piece of machinery built specifically for your assembly line.
Okay, so it's custom.
Very custom. And then the manufacturer breaches. You can't just run down to a hardware store and buy a replacement.
No, obviously not.
Right. It might take 2 years for another company to build a substitute. So because you cannot effectively cover, the court steps in and says, money won't fix this impending disaster. Hand over the actual machinery.
Makes total sense. Which brings us to the third category, personal services contracts.
Ah, yes.
And here is where I really struggle with the logic, honestly.
It throws a lot of people.
The rules state that specific performance is never available for personal services. Never.
Correct. Never.
But why? Let's say a major city spends years courting a star basketball player, right? They build an entire marketing campaign around him, sell thousands of season tickets, and he signs a massive 5-year contract.
Okay, big stakes.
Yeah. And then day 1 of training camp, he decides he'd rather play in a sunnier city and just breaches. Or, on a much smaller scale, say I hire a specialized artisan to build custom kitchen cabinets for my home.
Okay.
He takes my deposit, tears out my old cabinets, and then flakes. I have a half-destroyed kitchen.
A nightmare.
Why can't a judge look at that athlete or that artisan and simply order them to do the job they legally promised to do?
It is incredibly frustrating for the victim of the breach. I totally agree. But the legal system refuses to cross this line for 2 really profound reasons.
Okay, what's the first one?
First, forcing a human being to perform labor against their will runs dangerously close to involuntary servitude.
Oh, wow. You're talking about constitutional issues.
Precisely. The 13th Amendment,
Yeah.
it prohibits slavery and involuntary servitude.
Right.
You cannot physically force a person to perform personal labor for another, even if they signed a piece of paper promising they would. The law values human autonomy over the enforcement of a commercial promise.
Okay, I mean, I understand the constitutional human rights angle. That's a pretty huge barrier. But what's the second reason?
The second reason is pure, pragmatic, administrative headache.
Administrative headache. How so?
Think about it. How on earth would a court actually supervise that forced labor?
Oh, I see where you're going.
Let's go back to your star basketball player. If a judge issues an order forcing him to play, How does the court monitor his effort?
Yeah, what if he just, like, deliberately misses shots?
Exactly. What if he jogs slowly down the court instead of sprinting?
Mm.
Is the judge going to sit courtside and blow a whistle for contempt of court every time the player misses a free throw?
That would be ridiculous.
It would. Or your kitchen artisan. If a judge forces an angry, unwilling contractor into your home, they might do a terrible sloppy job out of spite.
Right, they could ruin my kitchen on purpose.
Exactly.
Mm.
Courts do not want to be in the messy, subjective business of supervising the quality of forced human labor.
So wait, the athlete and the contractor can just walk away with zero consequences? That feels entirely broken.
Oh, no, no, no. They don't walk away entirely free.
Oh, good.
You can absolutely still sue them for devastating monetary damages.
Okay, so the city can sue the athlete for the lost ticket revenue.
Yes. And you can sue the contractor for the cost of hiring someone else to fix your kitchen. But what's really fascinating here is that the law has a clever, almost sideways workaround when it comes to the labor itself.
A workaround? Like what?
A court will never force you to work for someone, but they can sometimes issue an injunction stopping you from working for someone else.
Ah, the injunction. This is the realm of covenants not to compete, right?
Exactly.
So if the city can't force the athlete to play for them, they can get a court order saying he isn't allowed to play for the rival team either.
You got it. If the personal services are truly unique or extraordinary, like a top-tier athlete, a famous entertainer, or, an executive with intimate knowledge of a tech company's secret source code, a court might enforce a negative injunction.
So they're essentially saying, we can't make you perform your contract, but we will prevent you from profiting by breaching it and going to a direct competitor.
That's the exact logic.
But you can't just slap a non-compete injunction on anyone, right? Like, if I run a local fast food franchise, I can't get an injunction stopping a cashier from working at the burger joint across the street.
No, you absolutely cannot. The rules outline 4 incredibly strict requirements for enforcing a non-compete.
Okay, let's go through those, because courts generally despise restricting a person's ability to earn a living.
Right. They hate it. So to get an injunction, first, the services must be truly unique, making money damages inadequate.
Okay, so a cashier is not unique, but a lead software architect is.
Exactly. Second, the covenant has to protect a legitimate business interest, like highly sensitive trade secrets or deeply cultivated client lists.
That makes sense. And third, it has to be reasonable in time and geographic scope.
Right. You can't ban a software engineer from coding anywhere in the universe for the next 50 years.
That would be insane. It usually has to be limited to, what, a couple of years? And just the specific geographic region where the company actually competes?
Yes, exactly. And the fourth requirement, enforcing the injunction cannot severely harm the public.
Give me an example of that.
Sure. Say a rural town only has one specialized heart surgeon, and the hospital tries to enforce a non-compete that would banish that surgeon from the entire county.
Oh, the court would strike that down.
Almost certainly. The public's need for medical care far outweighs the hospital's contract rights.
It really is a massive balancing act.
It is.
Now, even if you meet all the criteria for specific performance, let's say it's a totally unique piece of land, the breaching party doesn't just give up, right?
No, they have weapons too.
The legal machinery includes equitable defenses. These are specific arguments a breaching party can use to actively block a specific performance order.
Right.
Let's explore these, because they reveal a lot about how the law views fairness. First is laches. Explain laches to me.
Laches is essentially the legal doctrine of sleeping on your rights to the detriment of the other party.
Sleeping on your rights.
Yeah. It involves an unreasonable delay by the plaintiff that ends up prejudicing the defendant.
Give me a scenario where that actually happens in real life.
Okay, let's say I sign a contract to sell you my dilapidated, broken-down antique car.
Okay, undoubtedly unique.
Right. But then I breach. I refuse to hand over the keys.
And I get angry, but I don't actually file a lawsuit. I just wait.
Exactly. 5 years go by. During those 5 years, believing you've totally moved on, I pour $30,000 and hundreds of hours of my own sweat into completely restoring the car.
Oh, wow.
It is now a pristine, show-quality vehicle.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, you file a lawsuit demanding specific performance, demanding the car for the original low contract price.
I can see why a judge would hate that. It feels super unfair.
I would immediately argue laches. I would tell the judge, look, they unreasonably delayed bringing this suit, and because of that delay, I am severely prejudiced. I spent a fortune fixing it up. Enforcing the contract now, after they slept on their rights, would be uniquely unfair to me. and the judge would likely agree and deny specific performance.
Wow. Okay, the next equitable defense is unclean hands. I love the visual of this one.
It's a great name. It is a foundational ancient principle of equity courts.
Okay.
To get an equitable remedy, which is a remedy based on fairness, you yourself must come to the court with clean hands.
So if I did something sketchy.
Exactly. If the plaintiff engaged in some sort of fraud, deceit, or incredibly shady behavior related to the transaction itself, the court will simply refuse to help them.
Like if I tricked you into signing the land contract by hiding a toxic waste report.
Exactly. You can't then run to a judge and demand they force the sale. The court will look at your unclean hands and just tell you to get out.
Got it. And the final equitable defense is the sale to a bona fide purchaser.
This one is really crucial for the MBE. Let's say I promise to sell you that unique Picasso painting we talked about.
Okay, and you breach again.
I breach. But before you can get a court order forcing me to hand it over, I sell the painting to an innocent third party, a bona fide purchaser or a BFP.
So this third party, they paid fair value for the painting.
Yes, and they had absolutely zero knowledge that I had already promised it to you.
But wait, why does the law side with the third party? You promised it to me first. Why doesn't the law just rip the painting out of the hands of the third party and give it to the original buyer?
Because doing so would destroy the free flow of commerce.
How so?
Think about it. If every time you bought something you had to worry that a judge might mysteriously confiscate it months later because of some secret prior broken promise you knew nothing about, nobody would ever feel safe buying anything.
Oh, I see. It would be chaos.
Total chaos. The law heavily prioritizes protecting innocent buyers to keep the economy moving. So, if the unique item has already been sold to a BFP, the court will not grant specific performance to the original buyer.
So I just lose the painting entirely.
You lose the painting. But remember the second bucket. You can still sue me, the breaching seller, for every penny of financial damage I caused you.
Okay, that softens the blow. So, if you are navigating a contract dispute or if you are gearing up for the MBE, here's a survival tip you absolutely need to lock in. I'm talking directly to you listening.
Yes, write this down.
Regarding specific performance, it is heavily tested. Remember that it is almost always granted for land. It is granted for unique goods where cover is impossible. It is never granted for personal services, though injunctions might be used to stop them from working for competitors.
Perfect summary.
And always, always watch out for the defenses. Unreasonable delay through latches, shady behavior through unclean hands, or losing out to an innocent bona fide purchaser.
That is the perfect encapsulation of the equitable machinery.
All right. So if that covers unique, one-of-a-kind items, what happens when we step into the massive world of everyday standard goods?
Right, the stuff we buy all the time.
Exactly. What if the contract isn't for a rare Picasso, but for 10,000 standard industrial ballpoint pens or 50 commercial ovens?
Everyday goods are governed by a distinct set of rules known as UCC Article 2.
And the legal framework here has a completely separate choreography for buyers and sellers when it comes to non-monetary remedies. Let's explore the buyer's rights first.
Okay. Under Article 2, if a seller breaches, maybe they deliver defective ovens or they just refuse to deliver at all, the buyer has a few non-monetary options before they ever get to suing for cash.
What's the first one?
The simplest, most direct power is cancellation. If the seller materially breaches, the buyer has the unilateral right to simply cancel the contract entirely, reject any bad goods, and just walk away clean.
But what if I don't want to walk away? What if I desperately need those specific ovens I ordered?
Well, the rules introduce a very strange, archaic-sounding legal term here.
Replevin.
Yeah. It says a buyer can use replevin to recover identified goods.
What is the actual mechanism of replevin, though? Practically.
Replevin essentially means an action to physically recover specific items of personal property. It's the buyer going to a judge and saying, look, don't just give me a refund, issue an order allowing the sheriff to go to the seller's warehouse and physically take those specific ovens I ordered.
Whoa. The sheriff.
Yeah, it's pretty aggressive.
But the framework is very clear that this aggressive physical recovery is limited to incredibly narrow, specific scenarios, right?
Extremely narrow. You can't just do it whenever you want. Scenario 1, the buyer has already paid part or all of the purchase price, and the seller suddenly becomes insolvent. They go bankrupt within 10 days after receiving that first payment.
Let's stop right there. 10 days. Why such an incredibly specific, rigid time frame? Why exactly 10 days?
Because the law is using that 10-day window as a proxy for presumed fraud.
fraud.
Yeah, think about how business accounting works. A major company doesn't just wake up one morning and suddenly realize they are millions of dollars in debt.
Right, insolvency is a process. It takes time.
Exactly. If a seller takes your $50,000 deposit on a Tuesday and formally declares bankruptcy the very next Wednesday, the law presumes they knew they were going under when they took your money.
Wow, so they essentially stole your cash to pay off their other desperate creditors.
That's the presumption.
Yeah.
The 10-day rule allows the buyer to sort of jump the line in bankruptcy court. Instead of becoming just another unsecured creditor hoping for pennies on the dollar, you can use replevin to reclaim the actual goods you paid for.
Okay, that makes perfect logical sense.
It does. Now, scenario 2 for replevin. The goods were bought for personal, family, or household use.
Like consumer goods.
Right. If I buy a custom-built dining room table for my house, and I've paid for it, but the furniture store refuses to deliver it, I can potentially use replevin to just go get my table.
Okay, the law affords slightly more protection to everyday consumers than it does to massive commercial entities.
Exactly right. And scenario 3 is the concept we touched on earlier, inability to cover.
Right, the Picasso or the custom machine.
Yes. If, after a massive reasonable effort, the buyer simply cannot find substitute goods anywhere in the market, replevin allows the buyer to physically take the goods from the breaching seller because money literally cannot solve the problem.
Okay, so those are the buyer's non-monetary weapons. Let's flip the perspective. What can a seller do under the UCC if a buyer starts acting suspiciously or breaches?
The seller has incredibly powerful tools to stop the bleeding before they actually hand over the goods. The first is the power to withhold delivery.
Withhold delivery.
Yeah. If a buyer fails to make a required progress payment, or if the seller uncovers that the buyer has suddenly become insolvent, the seller can simply lock their warehouse doors. They don't have to throw good products into a black hole of bad debt.
But what if the goods have already left the warehouse? What if they are on a massive freight train heading across the country to the buyer?
Then the seller invokes the right to stop delivery in transit.
They can just stop a train.
As long as the goods are still in the possession of a common carrier, a trucking company, a railroad, a shipping line, and the seller learns the buyer's insolvent, the seller has the legal authority to call the freight company and say, "Do not deliver that cargo. Turn the train around."
That's a lot of power.
Okay, but what if the train has already arrived?
Yeah.
The goods are physically sitting on the buyer's loading dock. Can the seller just drive over and take them back?
This brings us to a highly tested critical rule for the MBE, reclaiming goods. If a buyer receives goods on credit while they're insolvent, the seller can legally demand those goods back.
Oh, really?
Yes, and this is a massive limitation. They must make that demand within 10 days of the buyer receiving the goods.
There is that exact 10-day window again. It's the mirror image of the buyer's rule.
Exactly. It's the same underlying philosophy. But there is one major exception to this 10-day limit that is constantly tested.
Okay, what is it? If the buyer actually lied to the seller about being solvent in writing, within 3 months before delivery, say they sent over a fake doctored financial balance sheet, that 10-day limit completely vanishes.
Whoa.
The seller has a much longer window to reclaim the goods because they were the victim of active documented fraud.
Okay, which brings us to a concept that I find incredibly relatable even outside of contract law, the right to demand assurances. This is found in UCC section 2609.
Yes, 2609. A great section.
I always explain this using a road trip analogy.
Let's hear it.
Okay, let's say you and I have been planning a cross-country road trip for 6 months. We are supposed to leave next Friday. But this week, I see you posting photos on social media showing you've just booked a cruise to the Bahamas for the exact same dates.
Oh, that's not good.
Right. Now, you haven't formally canceled our trip yet. You haven't officially breached. But I have a really bad feeling.
Understand.
I am not just going to sit in my packed car on Friday morning waiting to see if you show up. I am going to text you right now and say, hey, are we still doing this? I need proof you aren't flaking.
That is a brilliant analogy because in commercial business, the stakes are exponentially higher.
Give me a business example.
Imagine you are a general contractor building a massive skyscraper. You hear credible industry rumors that your primary steel supplier is missing payroll and defaulting on other contracts.
That's terrifying.
It is. You don't want to just keep pouring concrete and wait for the steel to magically not arrive in 3 months, ruining the entire project. The legal mechanics of demanding assurances allow you to be proactive.
So I can demand proof they'll deliver.
Yes. If reasonable grounds for insecurity arise, you don't have to wait for the actual breach. You can send a formal demand for written assurance that they will perform.
And here is the most powerful part of that rule. While I am waiting for them to reply to my demand, do I have to keep performing my end of the contract? Do I have to keep sending them progress payments?
No. You can legally suspend your own performance.
I can just freeze the contract.
You freeze it. You stop paying. You stop prepping until they provide adequate, concrete assurance that they can fulfill the deal.
And what if they just ignore my demand? What if they just completely ghost me?
The UCC establishes a very strict timeline to prevent the situation from hanging in limbo forever. If they fail to provide adequate assurance within a reasonable time, which the law explicitly defines as not exceeding 30 days, their silence is legally transformed into an anticipatory repudiation.
Anticipatory repudiation, meaning they have preemptively breached the contract before the deadline even arrived.
Precisely. The law says their failure to reassure you is the exact equivalent of them calling you and saying, "I am breaking the contract."
Wow.
You can immediately pivot and sue them for full damages without having to wait for the actual delivery date.
Man, if you are navigating commercial contracts, this is your survival tip. Lock in these specific timelines. Listen closely. Replevin and the seller's right to reclaim goods are heavily tied to a 10-day rule triggered by insolvency.
Don't forget the 3-month written exception for fraud.
Yes. And for the right to demand assurances, always remember that you have the power to suspend your own performance, and the other party has a maximum of 30 days to respond before you can declare a full anticipatory repudiation.
Those timelines are the gears of the UCC machinery. Very, very high yield.
So let's step back and look at the broader picture. If we cannot force performance through specific performance, and we cannot physically reclaim the goods under those UCC rules, the machinery has only one tool left.
The big one.
We are left with the most common foundational remedy in all of civil law: money. Let's explore the ultimate goal of damages. When a judge finally decides to write a number on a piece of paper, what exactly are they trying to achieve?
The guiding North Star for almost all monetary awards in contract law is a concept called expectation damages. You'll constantly hear it referred to as giving the victim the benefit of the bargain.
I always visualize expectation damages as a form of highly calculated legal time travel.
Time travel, I like that.
Yeah, because the goal isn't to punish the breacher. The goal isn't just to refund the victim. The goal is to mathematically teleport the injured party into the exact financial future they would have inhabited if the contract had been executed flawlessly.
Time travel captures the essence perfectly. Let's say you own a shipping company. You contract to buy a new cargo truck for $50,000. And you can mathematically prove that having that specific truck would have netted you $20,000 in pure profit from new delivery routes over the next year.
Okay, so a clear $20 profit.
Right. Then the seller breaches and refuses to sell you the truck. The court doesn't just want to give you your deposit back. The court wants to construct a reality where, at the end of the year, you are sitting at your desk with that $20,000 profit in your bank account, exactly as you expected.
That is the benefit of the bargain.
Exactly.
But this is where the legal machinery installs massive guardrails. Because you can't just walk into a courtroom, claim a breach, and demand $50 million because you wildly expected your new business venture to make you a millionaire.
No, absolutely not.
The rules mandate that you must clear 3 massive hurdles to access these expectation damages. The first hurdle is reasonable certainty.
Courts absolutely despise speculation. They will not engage in financial fortune-telling.
Give me an example of that.
Let's say you are opening a brand new, completely untested artisanal bakery. You order a commercial oven. The delivery is delayed by a month, which is a breach. You cannot go to court and say, if you had delivered that oven on time, my new bakery would have been a viral sensation and I would have sold 10,000 cupcakes a day.
I mean, I might think that, but I can't prove it.
Exactly. Unless you have a long-established track record, concrete historical data, or ironclad expert financial testimony proving those sales, your claim is pure speculation. You must prove your damages with reasonable certainty, or the court will award you nothing for lost profits.
Okay, the second hurdle is one of the most famous concepts in law: foreseeability.
Foreseeability is the great limiting principle of liability. It dictates that the damages must have been foreseeable to a reasonable person in the position of the breaching party at the exact time the contract was originally made.
I want to emphasize the timing there because it's so important. Foreseeable at the time the contract was made, not at the time of the breach.
Exactly. This is designed to protect people from bizarre, ruinous chain reactions.
Like what?
Let's say you hire me to fix a broken pipe in your basement for $200. I do a bad job, it leaks, and it ruins a cardboard box you left on the floor. Normally, I owe you for the box.
Right.
But what if you secretly stored a priceless, one-of-a-kind collection of ancient manuscripts in that damn cardboard box? And the leak destroyed $10 million worth of history. Am I on the hook for $10 million?
I hope not, for your sake.
No. Because when we made the $200 plumbing contract, it was entirely unforeseeable that a basement leak would destroy priceless antiquities. I only accepted the risk of normal basement damage.
That makes a lot of sense. And the third hurdle is the duty to mitigate. We are going to dive much deeper into the mechanics of this later, but the core philosophy is that the victim cannot just sit back, let the damages compound day after day, and then hand the massive bill to the breaching party.
Right.
You have an affirmative legal duty to take reasonable steps to stop the bleeding. If a portion of the damages was avoidable with minimal effort, you cannot recover that portion.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, what's truly fascinating is how these three limitations, certainty, foreseeability, and mitigation, reveal the deep friction at the heart of contract law.
Friction between what?
The system desperately wants to fiercely compensate the innocent victim of a breach, but it simultaneously recognizes that commerce would grind to a halt if every minor breach exposed a business to unforeseeable, speculative financial ruin. It is a highly calibrated, precarious economic balancing act.
And that balancing act is exactly why the law has developed what I like to call the damage menu.
I love that phrase.
Because expectation damages, that perfect time travel we talked about, is the gold standard. But what happens when you simply cannot prove them? Let's go back to your untested artisanal bakery. The oven arrives late. You can't prove your lost cupcake profits with reasonable certainty. Does the law just shrug and leave you with zero compensation?
No, thankfully. It offers alternative options on the menu.
Let's look at the menu. What's the first alternative?
When expectation damages fail, the court will often pivot to the second major item on the menu, reliance damages.
I try to simplify reliance damages as pure out-of-pocket expenses.
That is exactly how they function. If expectation damages are a time machine pushing you into a profitable future, reliance damages are a time machine pulling you back to the past.
So erasing the harm.
Yeah. If you cannot prove the profit you would have made, the court will at least reimburse you for the money you actually wasted in reliance on the contract happening.
Okay, so for the bakery, maybe I spent $5,000 hiring carpenters to build custom shelving specifically designed for that exact oven model. The oven never comes, and I have to buy a totally different oven that doesn't fit the shelves.
Precisely. You wasted that $5,000 relying on their promise. Reliance damages give you that money back. It doesn't make you profitable, but it restores you to the financial position you were in right before you signed the doomed contract.
Got it. Then we move to a category that is an absolute minefield in commercial litigation. Consequential damages, which are sometimes called special damages.
Pay attention here. This is a massive MBE topic.
Yeah.
Consequential damages are those extra cascading losses, very often lost downstream profits, that do not arise directly from the breach itself, but rather arise from the plaintiff's entirely unique special circumstances.
Okay, this can get confusing. Give me a concrete hypothetical showing the difference between a normal expectation damage and a consequential damage.
Imagine you run a business and you hire a specialized courier service to deliver a finalized, signed merger contract to a corporate office by 5:30 p.m. on a Friday. You pay them $100.
Okay.
The courier is negligent, stops for a long lunch, and delivers the contract at 6 p.m. The deadline is missed. The direct, standard expectation damage is simply the $100 you paid for a service you didn't get.
Just the delivery fee.
Right. But because that contract arrived late, the entire multi-million-dollar corporate merger collapses. You lose $10 million in guaranteed profit.
Ouch.
Yeah, that $10 million loss is a consequential damage. It is an extraordinary loss resulting from the unique circumstances of what was inside that envelope.
But surely the courier company isn't automatically liable for $10 million because their drivers stopped for a sandwich.
They are not. And here is the absolutely vital rule you must understand. Consequential damages are only recoverable if the breaching party knew or had reason to know of those special circumstances at the exact time of contracting.
Ah, foreseeability again.
Exactly. If you just handed the courier a sealed envelope and said, "Take this downtown," they had no reason to know millions were at stake. They are not liable.
What if I did tell them?
If you told the courier manager, "Look, this envelope contains a $10 million merger that expires at 5:00 p.m., which is why I'm hiring your premium service," then you have put them on notice. They accepted the contract fully foreseeing the massive risk, and they could be held liable for the consequential damages.
Wow. Foreseeability really is the key that unlocks consequential damages. Moving further down the menu, we have incidental damages. These are usually the smallest numbers on the spreadsheet.
Yeah, incidental damages are simply the routine administrative costs caused by having to deal with the messy aftermath of a breach.
Like what?
If a supplier sends you 1,000 defective computer monitors, the money you have to spend to inspect them, the cost to rent a storage unit to hold them while you argue with the supplier, and the freight cost to ship them back, those are incidental damages,
So just the hassle fees.
basically. They're almost universally recoverable because they naturally flow from the breach.
Okay, now let's examine the absolute outliers on the menu. These are the things you hear screamed about in dramatic television shows, but rarely actually encounter in contract litigation. First, punitive damages.
Yeah, in pure contract law, punitive damages, which is money awarded specifically to punish a wrongdoer and make an example of them, are almost never, ever awarded.
Really? Never. What if a massive corporation intentionally, maliciously breaches a contract with my small business just to bankrupt me and destroy a competitor? Shouldn't they be punished?
It feels incredibly unjust, I know, but the general rule remains no. Contract law is built on a foundation of economics, not morality. It seeks to compensate, not to penalize.
Are there any exceptions at all?
The only real exception where you might see punitive damages is if the conduct surrounding the breach was so egregious that it constitutes a completely separate independent tort, like intentional malicious fraud.
Okay.
But for a standard breach of contract, even an intentional bad faith breach, you do not get punitive damages.
Yeah.
Okay, and then there are nominal damages.
This is essentially the court issuing a token award. It is usually exactly $1.
$1. Why even bother?
It occurs when a plaintiff drags a case all the way to trial, absolutely proves that a breach occurred, but utterly fails to prove that they suffered any actual quantifiable financial loss. The court awards $1 just to state, for the legal record, you were right, the contract was breached.
It's a hollow, symbolic victory that usually means you just wasted thousands of dollars on attorney fees.
Precisely. It's a Pyrrhic victory.
Okay, the last item on the damage menu is one that always generates intense philosophical debate. Liquidated damages. This is when the two parties sit down and agree, in advance, right there in the text of the contract, on exactly how much the damages will be if someone breaches.
Right. For example, a commercial real estate contract might explicitly state, if the builder fails to complete the shopping mall by September 1st, the builder agrees to pay the owner $5,000 for every single day construction is delayed. That is a liquidated damages clause.
Now, here is where I really have to challenge the legal system's logic. We talk constantly about the sanctity of the freedom of contract, right?
We do.
The idea that two private parties can structure their business affairs however they see fit. So if we're two sophisticated business adults, and we both sit down, read a contract, have our lawyers review it, and we intentionally agree that the penalty for breaching is going to be a flat $1 million. Why does the state interfere? Why wouldn't a judge just enforce the agreement we explicitly consented to?
This raises an incredibly important question about the limits of private power. The courts have a deep-seated historical aversion to enforcing private penalties. As we just discussed regarding punitive damages, the law believes that the power to punish belongs exclusively to the state.
Okay, so no private punishment.
Right. Contract law is strictly about making the injured party mathematically whole. It is not about allowing private citizens to construct financial guillotines to terrorize each other into performing.
Wow, financial guillotines.
If a court looks at a contract and determines that a liquidated damages clause isn't a genuine attempt to estimate a loss, but is actually a disguised weapon designed to punish a breach, they will strike it down as an illegal penalty, completely voiding that clause of the contract.
So the courts are essentially protecting us from our own bad decisions. But how does a judge actually draw that line? How do they know if a clause is a valid liquidated damage or an illegal penalty?
The rules provide a very specific two-part validity test. To survive judicial scrutiny, the clause must pass both parts of the test.
Okay, what's part one?
First, the court looks backward to the time the contract was originally signed. At that exact moment, the potential actual damages must have been incredibly difficult to estimate.
Like what?
If you are building a massive, first-of-its-kind amusement park, it is nearly impossible to guess exactly how much revenue the owner will lose per day if the opening is delayed by a month. Because it's too difficult to calculate later, it makes sense to agree on a number up front.
Okay, that makes sense. And the second part of the test?
Second, the amount chosen in the clause must be a reasonable forecast of those likely damages. The number cannot be wildly, grossly disproportionate to the anticipated harm.
Back to the amusement park.
Right. If the park might realistically lose $10,000 a day in ticket sales, a clause setting damages at $10,000 a day is a reasonable forecast. A clause setting damages at $1 billion a day is clearly an extortionate penalty meant to cause terror, and it will be struck down.
There is a slight nuance to this under the UCC regarding the sale of goods. The framework notes that courts can occasionally look at the actual damages that happened after the breach to help validate the clause.
Yes, that's an interesting quirk.
Like, if the initial estimate seemed a bit suspiciously high when signed, but the actual real-world damages turned out to be catastrophic, the court might look at the reality and let the clause survive.
It is a slight relaxation of the strict backward-looking test, allowing reality to validate the forecast.
If you are taking notes for your business or studying for the MBE, here is your essential survival recap for the damage menu. You must fundamentally grasp the difference between expectation damages, which teleport you forward to the benefit of the bargain, and reliance damages, which teleport you backward to recover out-of-pocket expenses when expectation is too murky to prove.
Good summary.
And always remember the courier hypothetical. Consequential damages require the breaching party to have known about the special circumstances at the time of signing, and memorize that two-part test for liquidated damages. They are only valid if damages were difficult to estimate, and the chosen number is a reasonable forecast, absolutely never a penalty.
Perfect. Which brings us to a critical transition in our deep dive.
Where are we heading?
We have spent time establishing the foundational rules: expectation, reliance, foreseeability. But law doesn't exist in a vacuum. In reality, and especially on complex exams, context dictates the math.
Right.
The legal machinery applies these broad philosophies through very specific mathematical formulas depending on the exact industry or type of contract involved.
Let's unpack the math. We are going to look at how damages are calculated across four main arenas: sale of goods, sale of land, employment, and construction contracts. Let's start with the most common, the sale of goods under the UCC. Let's look at the specific formula for a buyer's damages.
Okay. If a seller completely fails to deliver the promised goods or delivers terrible defective goods that the buyer rightfully rejects, the buyer's standard mathematical formula is the difference between the original contract price and their cover cost.
We mentioned cover earlier. That is the reasonable cost of going out into the world and buying substitute goods from a different supplier.
Exactly. If our contract was for an industrial laser at $10,000 and you breach, and I have to scramble to buy a replacement laser from a competitor for $12,000, my expectation damages are the $2,000 difference.
Because that $2,000 puts you back where you expected to be.
Right. That $2,000 puts me in the exact financial position I would have been in if you hadn't breached. Plus, I get to add on any incidental or consequential damages, and I must subtract any expenses I magically saved because of the breach.
But what if I just get frustrated and decide not to buy a replacement? What if I choose not to cover?
The law doesn't force you to cover. If you don't, the formula shifts from your actual costs to a hypothetical market price. Your damages become the difference between the contract price and the open market price of those goods at the exact time you learned of the breach.
There is one more scenario for buyers. What if the seller delivers non-conforming goods, meaning they aren't exactly what I ordered, maybe the lasers are slightly underpowered, but I decide I need them too badly, so I just keep them anyway?
In that case, you have legally accepted the non-conforming goods. Your damage formula is the difference between the value of the goods as accepted the underpowered ones and the value they would have had if they were as warranted the perfect ones.
Okay, let's flip the equation to seller's damages. What is the math when the buyer refuses to accept perfect goods or cancels the contract early?
It is essentially the mirror image of the buyer's formula. The seller's primary formula is the difference between the original contract price and the resale price.
Give me the laser example again.
If I contracted to sell you that laser for $10,000, you back out, and I eventually resell it to someone else for $8,000 in a commercially reasonable manner, my damages are the $2,000 difference. And similarly, if I choose not to resell it, the formula is the difference between the contract price and the market price at the time of delivery.
Now we arrive at one of the most famously tricky concepts in all of contract damages, the lost volume seller.
Oh, this is a big one.
Here is where the rigid math meets the reality of modern commerce. I like to explain this using a massive boat dealership analogy. Let's say I own a sprawling dealership. I have 50 absolutely identical speedboats sitting on my lot.
50 identical boats. Got it.
You come in, fall in love with the boat, and sign an ironclad contract to buy it for $50,000. But the next morning, you get cold feet and back out. You materially breach.
Okay.
Now, a week later, a different customer walks onto my lot, points at that exact same speedboat, and buys it for $50,000. Under the normal formula we just discussed, contract price minus resale price, my damages are zero. $50,000 minus $50,000 is zero.
And if you explain that to a layperson, it seems entirely fair on the surface. They would say, hey, you sold the boat anyway for the exact same price. You suffered no harm.
But it is fundamentally unfair to the business.
Why?
Because I run a dealership with a massive inventory. If you had kept your promise and not breached, I would have sold that boat to you, and I still would have sold a different identical boat to the second customer. I didn't just casually resell your boat. Your breach caused me to lose out on the profit of making two simultaneous sales. I am a lost volume seller.
That analogy perfectly illuminates the underlying doctrine. The standard formula works perfectly if you were selling your one used car in your driveway.
Right.
But because the boat dealer had an essentially unlimited supply of standard goods, the standard formula completely fails to put them in the expectation position they deserve. Therefore, the UCC created a specific exception. It allows a lost volume seller to completely ignore the resale price formula. Instead, they simply recover the exact lost profit they would have made on the breached sale.
That is a crucial distinction to grasp. Now, there's one final rare remedy for sellers. Action for the price.
This happens when the seller is allowed to sue for the full, entire contract price, not just the difference in market value.
When does that happen?
This usually occurs in three specific scenarios. First, if the buyer actually accepted the goods and just stubbornly refuses to pay. Second, if the goods were completely destroyed in transit after the legal risk of loss had already passed to the buyer.
And the third.
Or third, if the goods are so bizarrely customized, like a neon sign featuring your specific face, that they are completely unsellable to anyone else in the world.
Okay, we survived the UCC goods formulas. Let's move to our second arena, sale of land. The math here is refreshingly straightforward.
It is. If a land contract falls through, and we aren't using specific performance to force the sale, the monetary damages are simply the contract price minus the fair market value of the land at the time of the breach.
Just simple subtraction.
Exactly.
Moving on to Arena 3, employment contracts. The legal framework makes a massive distinction here between at-will employment and contract employment.
That distinction dictates everything. Employment at will is the default in the United States. It means either the employer or the employee can terminate the working relationship at any time for almost any reason without notice.
So no breach.
Right. Because both parties have the legal right to walk away freely at any second, there's fundamentally no breach of contract possible for a standard termination.
But if there is a specific negotiated employment contract, say a guaranteed one-year agreement to act as a consultant, then we have damages. Let's say the employer breaches. They illegally fire the consultant on day 2 of the contract.
The employee is entitled to recover the full contract price. That means all the wages they expected to earn for the entire remaining term of the year. However, as we will discuss shortly, this is heavily subject to the duty to mitigate. They must look for replacement work.
What if the employee breaches? What if they sign a one-year contract and quit after a month to take a better offer?
Then the employer recovers the extra cost of finding a replacement worker. If they were paying you $100,000, and because you quit abruptly, they have to offer a massive premium of $120,000 to hire an emergency replacement, you owe the employer that $20,000 difference.
Our fourth and final mathematical arena is construction contracts. The foundational rule here is that timing dictates the formula. I want to walk through an extended hypothetical to really visualize how the math shifts. Let's imagine I hire a builder to construct a ridiculous, extravagant mega mansion, complete with a moat and a drawbridge for $5 million.
Wow, a moat. I love it.
Let's break this down chronologically, starting with scenarios where the owner me breaches the contract and fires the builder. What if I breach before construction even begins? Day 1, the lot is empty, no shovels are in the ground, but I cancel the project.
The formula for an early breach is simple. The builder gets their expected profit.
Just the profit.
Right. The law looks at the situation and says, look, you didn't actually do any physical work yet, So we aren't going to pay you for imaginary labor or materials you haven't bought. But you relied on this contract, and you shouldn't lose the profit margin you negotiated into the deal.
So if the builder anticipated a $1 million profit on my $5 million mega mansion, I owe them $1 million.
Yes.
What if I breach right in the middle of construction? Half the mansion is built, the moat is half dug, and I run out of money and fire them.
This is the most complex calculation. The standard formula is the total contract price minus the cost of completion. Alternatively, courts will calculate it as the builder's expected profit plus all the actual costs they have already incurred up to the exact moment of the breach.
Wait, those sound like different formulas.
They are, but both formulas are designed to arrive at the exact same number, ensuring the builder gets paid for the work done and the profit expected, but not for the work they will never have to do.
Got it. And what if I breach after the mega mansion is completely finished? The drawbridge is lowered, the keys are in the door, but I just stubbornly refuse to hand over the final check.
The builder gets the full contract price plus interest for the delay in payment. They did all the work. They get all the money.
Now let's reverse the roles. What if the builder breaches? Say they build the foundation of the mega mansion, realize they severely underbid the crazy moat design, and they just abandon the job site.
The owner gets the cost of completion. That means whatever it realistically costs to hire a brand new construction company to step into the mess, figure out the plans, and finish the exact job. Plus, the owner gets any reasonable damages caused by the inevitable delay in getting the building finished.
What if the builder actually finishes the mansion, but they are incredibly late? It was supposed to be done in June, and they finish in December.
The damages are usually calculated as the lost use of the property. If it was a commercial building, like a hotel, that means the massive lost rental value for the months it sat unfinished. For a private mansion, it might be the interest on the capital the owner had tied up in the delayed project.
Okay, that was an intense journey through the mathematical machinery. Now, in all of those specific formulas we just walked through, there is a silent underlying assumption at play. There is an expectation that the victim of the breach doesn't actively, stubbornly make the situation worse.
Right.
And that brings us to the duty to mitigate.
We are talking about the universal legal obligation to stop the bleeding and the closely related, deeply philosophical concept of economic waste.
This aspect of contract law has always fascinated me. A contract is undeniably broken. The victim has clearly been wronged by someone else's bad behavior. But the law doesn't allow the victim to just play the helpless victim.
No, it doesn't.
The legal system actually forces the innocent party to go out, expend energy, and do work to fix the situation they didn't create. Why does the law put the burden on the innocent?
Because contract law harbors a profound systemic hatred for economic waste. The courts despise seeing resources pointlessly destroyed or watching monetary damages multiply unnecessarily out of sheer spite or apathy.
So it's about efficiency.
Entirely.
Yeah.
Therefore, the governing rule is brutal but efficient. The injured party simply cannot recover damages that they could have reasonably avoided.
Let's apply this forced mitigation to the specific arenas we just explored. Employment. If you are a high-level executive wrongfully fired from a lucrative 3-year contract, you can't just move to a beach, binge-watch television for the next 3 years, and then successfully sue for your entire salary.
Absolutely not. You have an affirmative legal duty to actively seek comparable employment. If a very similar executive position opens up in your industry, in your geographic area, and you stubbornly refuse to even apply for it, the court will calculate what you could have reasonably earned at that new job and deduct that massive amount from your damages. Now, the law is reasonable. You don't have to accept a highly demeaning job, and you don't have to uproot your family and move across the country, but you must make genuine, demonstrable efforts to find similar work.
What about our construction hypothetical? If my builder is halfway through constructing my mega mansion and I call them and say, I just went totally bankrupt, I am completely breaching, I cannot pay you another dime, can the builder just say, too bad, we have a contract, and keep building the moat anyway just to run up the final bill?
That is the ultimate example of economic waste. In construction, the absolute general duty is that you must stop work immediately after learning of a breach.
Stop immediately.
Yes. If a builder keeps buying expensive lumber and paying daily wages to workers when they know for a fact the owner is out of money, they are actively, intentionally increasing the damages for no societal benefit. The court will punish that behavior. The builder will not be reimbursed for a single penny they spend after they learn of the breach.
The legal framework mentions one incredibly specific exception there. Unless finishing somehow reduces overall damages. How is that possible?
It usually applies to manufacturing. Sometimes it is actually cheaper and more efficient to finish assembling a near-complete, specialized item and sell it whole on the market, rather than stopping midstream and trying to sell a half-finished pile of useless parts for scrap metal. The law allows you to finish if it actually mitigates the total loss. But generally, the mandate is clear. Drop the hammers.
And for the sale of goods under the UCC, is there a strict duty to cover?
The UCC is slightly more flexible. There is no absolute mandatory duty to cover or to actively resell the goods. However, if you choose not to, you assume a significant risk. Your recovery will be strictly limited to the hypothetical market damages, even if your actual real-world losses end up being substantially higher because you sat on your hands.
And it is worth explicitly noting, if you do spend money actively trying to mitigate the damages, like paying for plane tickets to interview for that new executive job, or paying expensive warehouse storage fees while desperately searching for a new buyer for the rejected goods, those expenses are fully 100% recoverable as incidental damages.
Which transitions us to what might be my favorite quirk in all of construction law, and a perfect illustration of how the legal machinery handles absolute absurdity: the economic waste rule.
Oh, I find the philosophy behind this rule so compelling. Let's return to my ridiculous mega mansion. I hire a builder, and in the highly detailed 500-page contract, I specifically mandate that all the plumbing pipes hidden deep inside the walls must be Brand X premium copper pipes. I'm obsessed with Brand X.
Okay, Brand X only.
The house is completely finished, it is stunning, I move in, but a year later, I hire a plumber to fix a leak and he cuts open the wall. I discover, to my horror, that the builder secretly used Brand Y copper pipes throughout the entire house. Brand Y is identical in metallurgical quality, identical in price, and identical in water flee function. But it is technically a clear, undeniable breach of the specific terms of our contract.
Under the strictest, most literal interpretation of expectation damages, the builder would owe you the cost of completion or the cost to perfectly repair the breach to match the contract. To achieve that, you would have to literally tear down the walls of your finished $5 million mansion, rip out miles of perfectly good functioning Brand Y pipes, install the Brand X pipes, and completely rebuild the walls.
That sounds crazy.
It would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to fix an entirely invisible technical breach that hasn't actually harmed the function of the house at all.
And this is where the court steps back, looks at the math, and says, no, that is completely insane.
Exactly. The law labels that scenario unreasonable economic waste. Destroying a perfectly magnificent, fully functioning house merely to swap functionally identical pipes is an egregious, offensive waste of societal resources. Therefore, the economic waste rule kicks in and overrides the standard formula.
And what does it say?
It states that if fixing a construction defect would involve unreasonable economic waste, the damages are no longer the astronomical cost of repair. Instead, damages are strictly limited to the difference in overall market value between what you actually got and what you were contractually promised.
And in my pipe example, a mega mansion with Brand Y pipes is worth exactly the same amount of money on the real estate market as a mansion with Brand X pipes. The difference in value is precisely zero. So my damages are zero.
Exactly. You get absolutely nothing, because giving you hundreds of thousands of dollars to tear down walls for a microscopic, invisible harm would result in a massive, unfair windfall for you. Contract law isn't a lottery ticket.
Now, the rules do note that courts are fiercely divided when the breach is aggressively willful. Like, if I can prove that the builder intentionally, maliciously swapped the pipes just to spite me or save a few pennies knowing I hated Brand Y, some courts will force them to pay to tear down the walls anyway, purely as a matter of principle to punish the intentional deceit. But generally, the economic waste rule prevails to protect resources.
Which brings us to the final major section of our exploration into the machinery of remedies. We've spent an hour dissecting how to rigorously enforce contracts and mathematically calculate complex expectation damages. But what if we want to hit the erase button?
What if we just want to pretend the entire contract never happened? Or what if there was a massive typographical error in the document? Or, even more fundamentally, what if we didn't even have a valid contract in the first place, but someone still did incredibly valuable work?
This is where we leave the realm of expectation and look at restitution, rescission, reformation, and the ticking clock of time limits.
Let's start with restitution, which is also fascinatingly known as quasi-contract.
If expectation damages are entirely focused on building a profitable future, restitution is entirely backward-looking. The core animating principle of restitution isn't about enforcing a promise. It is about preventing a concept called unjust enrichment.
Unjust enrichment, meaning it is fundamentally morally unfair for one person to receive a highly valuable benefit for free entirely at the expense of someone else.
Exactly. Restitution is an incredibly versatile tool available in several distinct scenarios. It is available when a contract is breached after one party has already partially performed heavy labor. It is available when a contract turns out to be totally void or legally unenforceable from the start, perhaps due to a technical failure under the statute of frauds.
The rules state it is even available when absolutely no contract existed at all.
Yes.
If one party conferred a massive benefit expecting compensation, and the other party would be unjustly enriched by keeping it for free, restitution steps in.
Give the classic hypothetical for this.
The classic hypothetical is the unconscious patient. A person collapses on the street. A doctor runs over and performs emergency, life-saving CPR. There was obviously no contract signed. They couldn't negotiate price. But the doctor can still sue the patient's estate for the reasonable value of those medical services.
Because keeping it for free would be unjust.
Right. The law says it would be an unjust enrichment for the patient to receive free life-saving care simply because they were incapable of signing a contract.
That is the sheer essence of quasi-contract. The law literally invents a fake fictional contract out of thin air purely to ensure a fair economic outcome. And because the theory is different, the measure of restitution damages is distinctly different from expectation damages.
You aren't calculating lost profits.
No. The measure is usually the exact objective value of the benefit conferred on the defendant. Or, if that's too difficult to measure, it's the reasonable open market value of the services rendered.
Now, here's a fascinating loophole that savvy litigators use: losing contracts. The framework reveals that restitution can actually yield more money than the original contract price if the deal turned out to be a terrible losing proposition for the performer. Explain the mechanics of that.
Okay, let's say you foolishly agreed to build a massive commercial garage for $100,000. It's a terrible deal for you. You completely miscalculated the cost of concrete, and it's actually going to cost you $150,000 in labor and materials. You are guaranteed to lose $50,000 on this disastrous job.
Ouch. Okay.
You are exactly halfway done, having poured $75,000 of your own money into it, when the owner suddenly completely breaches the contract and permanently locks you off the property. If you sued for normal contract expectation damages, the court would look at your expected profit, realize it was wildly negative, and you would be in serious trouble.
But because the owner breached, I can abandon the contract and sue for restitution instead.
Yes. You can walk into court and say, forget the contract, the owner completely breached it, so it's dead. Let's look purely at unjust enrichment. I built half a massive commercial garage on their land. The objective market value of half a garage of that quality is $75,000.
So I get $75,000 instead of taking a massive loss on the original contract.
The court awards you $75,000 in restitution, allowing you to essentially magically escape the parameters of your own terrible losing contract simply because the other side made the mistake of breaching first.
That is an incredible tactical maneuver. But what if I was the one who broke the contract? Can a party who intentionally, aggressively breaches a contract still turn around, point at the work they did, and demand restitution?
It seems counterintuitive, but surprisingly, under the modern legal view, yes. The law maintains its absolute hatred for unjust enrichment, even if allowing it would benefit a completely innocent party. Wait, no, even if it benefits the breaching party.
Really? Give me an example.
Imagine you contract to build a $200,000 house. You do $80,000 worth of utterly perfect, flawless framing and foundation work. Then you just get bored, completely abandon the job site, and refuse to return. You are entirely in breach.
Okay.
But the innocent owner now has an $80,000 foundation sitting on their land for free. The modern view allows you, the breaching plaintiff, to sue for the $80,000 benefit you clearly conferred.
But wait, the owner is the victim. They were wronged. They shouldn't have to just write a massive check to the person who abandoned them.
They don't just write a check free and clear. The machinery balances the scales. Your restitution recovery is strictly mathematically limited. You get the value of your work minus all the extensive damages your subsequent breach caused the owner.
Oh, I see.
If it costs the owner an extra $30,000 to hire an emergency replacement crew because you walked off, Your $80,000 restitution is aggressively reduced by that $30,000 penalty. The innocent party is made whole first, and only then is the remaining unjust enrichment addressed.
That brings a chaotic situation back into perfect mathematical balance. Okay, let's look at the other two erase buttons in the machinery: rescission and reformation.
Rescission literally means terminating or canceling the contract entirely. The goal isn't to fix a breach. The goal is to systematically return both parties exactly to their pre-contract positions, as if the deal had never, ever happened.
The grounds for rescission are usually fundamental, fatal flaws in the very creation of the contract itself. Things like mutual mistake. We both honestly believed the cow we were buying was barren, but it turns out she was pregnant and worth 10 times more. Or cases of severe misrepresentation, extreme duress, undue influence, illegality, or a complete failure of consideration. If the foundational bedrock of the agreement is rotten, the court rescinds the whole thing and orders everyone to return whatever they received.
Reformation is an entirely different mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
Reformation isn't throwing the contract in the shredder, it is performing surgery on it. It is the court physically intervening and correcting the written document so that it actually matches the true original agreement the parties had reached in their minds.
Like fixing a catastrophic typographical error. Say we verbally agree, clear as day, to sell a commercial property for $1 million, but the paralegal accidentally types $100,000 on the final document, and we both foolishly sign it without reading the fine print.
Exactly. That is a mutual mistake regarding the writing itself, not the agreement. The court will literally reform the document to read $1 million. And importantly, the legal framework notes that the parole evidence rule and the statute of frauds, which normally block outside evidence from contradicting a written contract, generally do not bar a claim for reformation. You are allowed to bring in outside emails or witness testimony to prove the typo exists.
And finally, we have the ticking clock, the statute of limitations. Because the machinery won't wait for you forever. You can't sue someone for a breach of contract 40 years after the incident happened.
The rules specifically highlight the UCC rule for the sale of goods. It establishes a very strict 4-year statute of limitations.
The framework also notes that the parties can mutually agree in their contract to shorten that window, but they are forbidden from shortening it to less than 1 year. You can't hide a predatory clause in page 50 saying the buyer must file a lawsuit within 24 hours of delivery.
And critically, that 4-year clock starts aggressively ticking the exact moment the breach actually occurs, which is usually the day the defective goods are delivered. It starts ticking regardless of whether you actually notice the defect on that day, unless the contract included a very specific warranty explicitly extending to future performance.
If you are taking the bar exam, or if you are managing complex contracts, here's your final essential survival tip regarding these erase buttons. Remember that restitution is your ultimate bulletproof fallback plan. It is entirely about preventing unjust enrichment, and the math is measured by the value of the benefit conferred, absolutely not by your lost profit.
That's vital to remember.
And always remember that rescission and reformation are classified as equitable remedies. That means, just like specific performance, they are subject to those equitable defenses we discussed hours ago. If you delay unreasonably, latches will block your rescission. If you act fraudulently, unclean hands will block your reformation.
That is the perfect synthesis of the entire system.
So, what does this all mean? We have journeyed through an incredibly dense, intricate landscape of legal machinery. We started this deep dive talking about the deep emotional weight of a broken promise, the pain of a friend not showing up. But as we have seen through every calculation, every limitation, and every rigid 10-day rule, contract law remedies are entirely devoid of emotion.
Completely devoid.
They aren't about punishing bad behavior. They aren't about enforcing a moral code or shaming the person who broke their solemn word. They are about sheer, cold, calculated economic efficiency.
It is ultimately entirely a math equation.
That is exactly what it is.
If we connect all of these formulas and rules to the bigger picture of how society functions, it leaves us with something quite profound and perhaps a little unsettling to consider. The system is intentionally designed to allow a party to sit down, look at a spreadsheet, and mathematically calculate the exact, precise cost of breaking their promise. And if breaking that promise is ultimately more profitable for their business than keeping it even after paying full, perfect expectation damages to the victim, the legal system essentially allows, perhaps even quietly encourages, them to do it.
That is known in legal theory as an efficient breach.
It is. It asks you to deeply consider whether a legal system that aggressively treats a broken promise purely as a mathematical equation rather than a fundamental moral failing is actually the best way to structure a trusting society.
Hmm.
Or if it simply trains people to break their word whenever the spreadsheet dictates that betrayal is profitable.
That is a fascinating, enduring tension. The messy, emotional reality of human interaction ultimately gets fed into this rigid, cold, mathematical machine, and out pops a dollar amount that's supposed to make it all perfectly okay. It's an incredible system that perfectly fixes the economic ledger, but intentionally, perhaps tragically, ignores the soul of the promise itself. Thank you for joining us on this incredibly detailed deep dive into the complex architecture of contract remedies. Keep questioning the rules, keep looking closely at the underlying machinery of the law, and keep exploring.